Okay, hello everybody and welcome to our panel discussion on teaching in the California State University or CSU system. We're really excited about this event today. I'm thrilled that there's so much interest. I'm Mary Hegarty, by the way, Associate Dean of the Grad Division, and we're really excited that there's so much interest in this from grad students and postdocs at UCSB, and we're also really thrilled to have 5 outstanding colleagues with us today from California State University Channel Islands, which is just down the road in Camarillo. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the panel today. First of all, our moderator will be Blake Gillespie. Oh, I should tell you we're recording this, if you have any questions, you should put them in the chat, but we will not be recording who posted those questions. So we will take your questions, but you will not be identified. So if you have any questions as you go along, just put them in the chat. And now I want to introduce the panel. Our first, Blake Gillespie, who is going to be moderating today. Dr. Gillespie is professor and chair of the chemistry department at CSU Channel Islands. He received his PhD in chemistry from the University of Oregon. And after a postdoc at UCSB, began teaching biochemistry at CSU Channel Islands in 2003, and is now the chair of the chemistry department, as I said. In his research, Dr. Gillespie uses small proteins and simplified model systems to address basic problems in biophysics, such as the physical basis of protein thermostability, the role of natural selection in determining protein folding kinetics, and the hydrodynamic properties of protein unfolded states. Our next panelist will be Dr. Raquel Baker, who is an assistant professor in English at CSU Channel Islands. Dr. Baker earned her PhD in English Literary Studies from the University of Iowa, and she began teaching literature and creative writing courses at CSU Channel Islands in 2017. Her research focuses on examining representations of liberated consciousness in Anglophone African literatures to deepen insights on subject formation in relation to race, gender, nationalist formations, market forces, technical advances, and post-coloniality. And next, we have Dr. Ahmed Awad, who is an associate professor of chemistry. Dr. Awad received his PhD in chemistry from the University of Ulm in Germany. He also spent some time at UCSB as a postdoc, and he began teaching in the chemistry department at CSU Channel Islands in 2007. His research is in the interface between chemistry and biology. He's interested in the investigation of novel drugs for the treatment of cancer, including the chemical synthesis of modified nucleotides, and nucleic acid, called therapeutic nucleic acids. And next we have Selene Benuelas, who received her PhD in applied mathematics from the University of Southern California. Selene was an undergraduate at UCSB, I believe. She began teaching in the mathematics department at CSU Channel Islands in 2014, and her research interests lie in the fields of differential and difference equations, dynamical systems, and its applications to mathematical biology. And from the Department of Sociology at Channel Islands, we have Karina Chavarria, who received her PhD in sociology from the University of California, Los Angeles. And she began teaching in the sociology department at CSU Channel Islands in 2018. Her research examines the relationship between structured educational inequalities, particularly as they impact marginalized youth across race, ethnicity, and immigration status, and youth's agency in enacting transformative social change. So again, we're really thrilled to have this outstanding panel. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to Blake Gillespie, who will be moderating the panel.
Thanks, Mary, and hello, everyone. So I think this panel is about introducing you to life, the life of a professor at primarily undergraduate institutions, or PUIs. I myself came from a PUI as an undergraduate at the Evergreen State College. I kind of grew up thinking that PUIs were where I would want to see myself, and in fact, that's kind of the way things worked out. But I sort of knew what I was getting into, close interaction between professors and their students, research groups populated by undergraduates. What I want to say too, though, is Channel Islands is a small place. And I want you to remember that it's less than 7,000 students. And as we hear the stories of my colleagues, remember that there's something like 4,000 undergraduate institutions in the United States compared to something like 400 PhD granting institutions. There's no one description of a PUI for you to walk away with today, but there are some common themes, and we hope we can give you a sense of what this slice of academia is like. I have some questions that are prepared, but I want to encourage the colleagues to make sure you get your own ideas across, whether they fit this script or not. And let's remember too that all our lives have been upended by the pandemic, and if there's ways that your answers have changed because of the pandemic, maybe let's remember to plug that in as well. The way I'm going to kind of do this is I'm going to go through a set of questions, and I'm going to begin with one of the panelists, and we'll either walk through the set of panelists and their responses, or if it works out to be a more organic set of responses from the panelists, that can work too. You can also raise your hands, panelists, if you need to chime in. And everybody, I'm totally open to as much assistance with managing questions as possible, or as need to be. So without further ado, I'm going to open it up with Raquel, Dr. Baker, and ask you, Raquel, how and why did you choose to work in the CSU?
Darn that Zoom. I chose to work in the CSU because of my experience. I graduated from San Francisco State University. And then the other reason is because I wanted to live in California. So after my undergraduate and graduate and postdoctoral fellowship experiences, I realized that where I live is incredibly important part of my happiness. And so, yeah, I knew I wanted to live in California. And I remember the way that I felt after my BA from San Francisco State compared to other institutions that I have been at. I felt like a really whole person. It was a great experience. So I decided that I wanted to be part of creating that experience for other students.
Great, thank you. Yes, geography can be really important. Ahmed, can you chime in too?
Sorry, was muted. Hi everyone. For me, how did I choose Cal State University or Cal State Channel Island? I received my PhD from University of Ulm in Germany, and then applied for a postdoc position in United States. I received one at Iowa State University. So I spent 2 years in Iowa with my family. I have two boys, were two kids at this time, 2 boys and my wife. Then after 2 years, just my family wanted to move, go somewhere else. So I applied for a second postdoc and received one at UCSB. We enjoyed the time at UCSB. It was a wonderful move from Iowa to Santa Barbara. I remember when I got this postdoc at UCSB, my professor at Iowa State, she came and told me stay 1 more year and had a new contract for me with higher income, increase the money. Our project was going very well. But also, like, kind of, she were feeling that I should go, like it's Santa Barbara. So it was nice move to Santa Barbara. Spent wonderful time there, 1 year at UCSB. And then during this time, I tried to think about exploring my next step and find a job. So, and we loved the area, so we wanted again to stay around. So I applied for, and I wanted to work for university. So looked for places around. There was Santa Barbara Community College. I did apply at Santa Barbara Community College and at Cal State Channel Island. And I went for interview in both places. And what happened is my postdoc was still going on at UCSB. So I chose Cal State Channel Island because it was a lecturer position, part-time position. So I kept my postdoc and commuted first semester at Channel Island. Then second semester, and Blake was there at Channel Island, he was before me, so they offered me a full-time position, lecturer position. So I did accept it because it's not postdoc training anymore, it's a job. So I did accept the job and moved to Camarillo, where Cal State Channel Island is. And since then, I just, I was loving, I love research. So I was doing a lecture and do my research at the same time until there was opening for assistant professor positions, for which I applied and I got in. So that's my story.
Great. Everything, yeah, everybody's story is a little different, of course. Celine, what about you?
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so why I chose the CSU, in particular, I mean, I grew up in Southern California. I'm from East LA, actually. I went to UCSB as an undergrad and then USC for my PhD. So I've had the great fortune of staying in Southern California. But I also, in particular, wanted to work at a place that values both teaching and research, somewhere where you didn't necessarily need to sacrifice one for the other. So I knew I didn't want to, teach at a place that only concentrated in teaching, or one place that only, valued research. I wanted a good mix of the two. Opportunities for growth in pedagogy. I think a lot of us in STEM in particular can attest to this, that you have your PhD in your STEM field and then you get your academic job and then you teach classes, and because you have a PhD, you're like, go teach. But we never really got the chance to learn how to teach. And that's one of the things that I definitely appreciate in the CSU system, that there's opportunities for that growth, and that they value it. It's part of our RTP, our retention tenure promotion process. But also, though, again, because I was so interested in California, there is also the question between a CSU versus a private liberal arts university. And I did apply to some of those, but I'd say I was definitely leaning more towards the CSU because of the open access university style and the student body it serves. Cal State Channel Islands in particular, I mean, it's the newest of the 23 CSU system schools. It was built to serve this community because there was no four-year university in this area for 40-something years. So, I mean, people had been asking for a school here. And because it's one of the newest CSUs, so I'm putting a plug in for CI, of course, there's a lot of opportunities for leadership. It's a growing institution. And so, you as an incoming faculty get to provide a whole lot of input. And that was definitely something important for me, coming from very large universities where, they were set in their ways. And I was coming in here with a bunch of new ideas and nobody wanted to listen to me. So it's definitely one of those important things. Another thing also to note about the CSU system is that there are several CSUs that have master's programs. We in mathematics have a master's program. So as I mentioned before, that it was really important for me to focus both on teaching and research. Having master's students is definitely a way to get that, to keep that up, to get that going. So those are my reasons.
Cool. Thank you for mentioning a couple of those things in particular. I just want to reiterate a little bit. RTP is something that we'll hear plenty about, and that refers to the process of getting tenure and then advancing to full professorship after your associate promotion. So retention, tenure, and promotion is that process. I also wanted to thank you for mentioning or alluding to the sort of the educational equity component, and that's a really important aspect, obviously, of higher education and the CSUs in particular, I might argue. But also just the number of those undergraduate institutions too. I want to remind people too, there's a certain element of being able, as Celine suggests, of finding a fit for yourself, which is really cool to touch on. So thanks. Karina, can we bring you in now?
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to have you here. I hope your quarter is off to a great start, though we haven't started technically yet at CI. Why I chose a CSU, like everyone else, my own determinations, commitments shaped why I decided to pursue my professional career at a CSU. I've always worked with marginalized and underrepresented students since I was at community college. And so once I was nearing the end of my PhD program at UCLA, and my colleagues can attest to this or not, reality starts to sink in real quick. And for many of us at R1 institutions, we're primarily, tracked to pursue R1 careers, right? And so access to workshops like these, to knowledge, to information, to know-how about opportunities other than at R1 institutions were pretty slim. And so I knew I still wanted to continue doing research. I definitely wanted to work with underrepresented, first-gen, working class students, right? And I wasn't necessarily sure that R1 institutions was the sure place I wanted to be at and continue doing this work, right? And so I applied to everything, right? Small liberal arts, CSUs, R1s, privates, publics. But then I realized that the grind of tenure line for R1 institutions is really harsh, and I wasn't necessarily sure that I wanted to do that to my body for 5 more years. PhD programs can be quite strenuous, and so I still wanted to do research, but I also wanted to bridge that with the activist work that I do with students. And some of the most significant avenues are either nonprofit work or liberal arts institutions or institutions like our CSU system here. And so I applied to a number of CSUs, and my research focuses and my work focuses on undocumented students and Indigenous students. This area was really important, particularly Ventura and its connection to Southern California that has a large population of Indigenous and undocumented students. And so this was, CI was a great fit, both for the kind of work that I wanted to do as a professional, but also for the kind of work that I do as an activist and working with youth. And those are the primary reasons that shaped my decision to pursue my career at CI.
That's really great to hear how closely tied the work that you want to pursue is to the institution that you find yourself. The other thing that you mentioned that I want to expand on a little bit was the idea of what RTP is like and the tenure grind. And I think, I did my graduate work at an R1 and I've seen firsthand what that looks like. And as well at UCSB. And so I guess a factoid that I can just throw out for you is that this is not universally true of PUIs, but at Cal State Channel Islands, the tenure rate is very high. I can count on one hand the faculty that have been denied tenure since I've been at the institution for that's nearly 20 years. That isn't to say that it's an easy process, but it's a very supportive process, which I think is important. Again, alluding to what Karina mentioned about what are you doing to yourself over the course of your career. And I guess it'll depend on the institution there, but that how what you experience can be very different at different places, and Channel Islands happens to be a place where the tenure process is a very supportive one. Karina, can we stick with you for the second question, which has to do with balancing teaching, service, and scholarship. So these are the big elements of RTP, and so how we deal with these at a primarily undergraduate institution is very interesting. How we deal with that at Channel Islands is what we want to hear about next.
Of course, yeah. As I mentioned, much of my decisions around pursuing post-secondary education and particularly graduate education have been informed by not only my own experiences as a first-gen immigrant undocumented for much of my life. The work that I do and have been doing with students for more than a decade now really determines a lot of the service and research I do. That's kind of my grounding for the decisions I make. And so I learned through 8 years of a PhD program that finding that balance between research, teaching, and service really was critical for my own kind of well-being and for me to do the kind of work that was fulfilling and that was in the service of students primarily, right? And so a lot of the decisions I make around the service that I do for my program, sociology, for the university, for the broader community in which I live, are informed by what's going to be the outcome for students, who are my primary kind of consumers, right? They are the one. I'm a public servant. I work at a public institution. I respond to them, right? They pay my paycheck, right? Their taxes pay my paycheck. So I'm responsible to them. And whenever opportunities come down the pipeline, I always consider, okay, how is my work here going to support the educational access opportunities and support systems for students? And that's the bottom line in terms of how I manage to maintain a balance in teaching, service, and scholarship.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Can we go to Celine now for your answer?
Yes, thanks. So the question is about how are we balancing our teaching, service, and research, and my answer is I'm not. It's very difficult to. So one thing to note about many of the CSUs is that our class sizes are smaller, which is great. So when I was at UCSB, my Calc 2 class was like 300, 400 students. With one instructor, but they had TAs and they had graders. We usually at the CSU do not. So the classes are usually smaller. So you have about like say 20, 30 students per class. Of course, I'm speaking for CI in particular, but I think this is true in general. And it's also true in general that there are no TAs or graders for your courses. So especially in STEM, especially in math, when the custom is to have students do homework every week, plus 2 to 3 midterms a semester, plus a final, it's like you're constantly grading. So that's something that you have to keep in mind. And also, again, goes back to the pedagogy, which is like handing out homework every week really the way to go still. I'm getting into just teaching and learning aspects here. But I would say though, with the research, for me, it's being part of research groups. So I have collaborators all over the United States, in Spain and China and so on. So being part of these groups is really helpful for me because it keeps myself like I'm accountable, so I have to, we meet weekly, we're checking out some papers and all that. So it's super helpful for me to be part of a team to keep me accountable. And one of the things I recommend for all graduate students here who are interested in academic jobs in the CSU system is to look at the tenure track ratios with students as well. We at CI are not great for that. And it's really important to note that, because I mentioned before, I was really interested in CI because it was so young, relatively young as a university. There's a lot of service opportunities. A negative is that there are a lot of service opportunities, so many for very few tenure track faculty. And so you are really spread thin, especially if you want to help out in a lot of these committees and all that. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. Another suggestion also is protect your time. Protect your time as much as possible. When you're interviewing, ask your department chairs, your future department chairs, like, what kind of protections do you have for your junior faculty? Do you even try to protect your junior faculty from like a whole lot of service opportunities and all that? And although, again, our many universities are growing and are going to be searching for a whole lot of factors, that's great. But then that means that you're going to have to serve on those committees for searches, which have like hundreds of applicants and all that. Again, all positives, and also, take up a whole lot of your time. And with service, another thing that I wanted to mention also is with us in mathematics, there's a lot of service, like national service. We have, the Mathematical Association of America, we have the American Mathematical Association Society, AMS, MAA, SIAM, you name it. We have a bunch of societies with a lot of committees as well. And so sometimes, you're going to be pulled in different directions, from like serving your university to serving national committees, to your research and your teaching. But there are also ways, though, I think it's really important to bridge your research with your teaching. I think that's really important, because we have courses at CI where you're able to teach a course while having your students do research. And many of us publish with our students as well, our undergraduate students. So that's, again, even though that might not necessarily be research that you do on just by yourself or with your own research teams, it's still a way to bring in real life experiences for your students, and also, get some work done yourself.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great, and it's good to remember that. Talking about service for a second, it's good to remember that it's wonderful to be able to couple service to the service tasks you're doing to the work that you love doing, and then somebody has to sit on the student fee committee too. And those it's harder to couple that directly to your own personal and professional agenda, but those are two ways of approaching service for sure. Let's go to Ahmed. Let's hear from you. Balance of research, service, and teaching.
Balancing teaching, service, and scholarship. So again, I agree with my colleagues. Our system, California State University system, is very supportive. And what I mean with that is for junior faculty and the new faculty, the system encourages them, they are encouraged to focus on their teaching and research. So you don't have to worry much about service in your first year or second year. And we are teaching institute. And even when we get evaluated for tenure or for retention or promotion, in teaching, we have to have the highest score. Like you have score from, we have scores, I think 5 is the highest score. So in teaching, we must have 4 to get tenure. So again, teaching is very important at California State University system. Junior faculty and new faculty are encouraged to focus on teaching, develop their teaching materials, the course materials. Scholarship, it depends on the person. There are people who like to do research, engage student, publish papers. There are other people who say, no, I will just like have one paper is enough for me. So it's something like hobby. I look at it like that, hobby. There are people who publish 500 papers, and others they publish like couple papers or 5 papers. So it's hobby. So again, it depends on the individual. It depends on the subject, on the area. Service also, that's individual, depends on the people. There are people who say, I don't care, for example, about the government. I don't want to involve in big decisions. There are people who say, no, I want to involve in this committee because I want my voice to be heard, and I want to have influence on the big decisions that happened on campus. There are people who say, okay, I will serve on, like, choose what you want to serve on, like for example, I'm interested in research. I will serve on the student research committee. There are others who will say, no, I will search on the curriculum committee. So all of these things is individual and personal, but teaching is very important, again, at Cal State system. And we, like everyone, including you have PhD, so we should be able to balance and manage our work.
Thank you. And before we go to Raquel, I just want to say there has been a question about the structure of that the RTP pathway, and maybe we can find more time to talk about that as we go. But I will say that when I said earlier that I said that the process can be more supportive, one way to read that is to understand that the process can be very well defined, up to and including the number of research publications that you're expected to generate over that period of time. It's not vague. It's very clearly established in what your own departments and what the institution's RTP guidelines are. So it can be easier to understand the target you're aiming at. Raquel, you've been at Channel Islands for over 3 years now, right? What can you tell us about how you're managing this challenge?
I'm not managing it very well. I don't do a good job of finding balance. But essentially, when you first begin, you don't have a 4-4 loads. You don't teach 4 classes a semester. So that structure helped me focus on my teaching when I was just focusing on the 3 classes, and also to focus a little bit on research. So I would say the main way that I keep balance is by a kind of back burner, front burner approach. And there are times when I'm focusing on 1 or 2 things, and then the 3rd thing kind of falls off. That's why I feel like I'm not that good at balance. I'm just more good at focusing on some and putting some others off to the side. And I think it just changes as I'm more comfortable with the classes. So I have a kind of mantra that you aren't really teaching a class until you've taught it 5 times. You don't really even understand what it is you're teaching or what you're trying to do. So I'm kind of not at that place. I haven't been here long enough to have taught all my classes 5 times. So I'm really just building up. And then I feel like when I'm have a kind of stable of classes that I've taught several times that I'm comfortable with, then I can turn my focus to service. So I started my focus here on research because that's what I was most nervous about in relation to getting tenure. And then after I had a 4-4, now the focus is the teaching. And when I feel like I have that together, the focus will probably be service.
Yeah, I think that sounds like a really, I won't say natural, but a familiar progression to me too. And the more senior you are, the greater the sort of the, let's say, expectation is to participate in university service in more of a leadership positions. And the goal is for you to stay focused on research and development of your Raquel's incredibly innovative teaching, right? As you begin. So thanks for that, guys. Let's go to Ahmed for the next question. And I do want to emphasize that if there's time, we can spell out clearly what the RTP process actually looks like. I know students are interested in that. So Ahmed, can you start us off on talking about the barriers to success that you have grappled with in research, teaching, and service at Channel Islands?
Yeah, so challenges in research, teaching, and service. I can pick one, for example, the first one, research. Challenges in research will be, I think it's two parts. First, we work with undergrad students that lack experience and experience, and also they are busy with classes, exams, so they don't have full commitment to research. The second part in research, I think it's financial support. Like we do have money to do research and we apply for grants and stuff like that, but it's not the amount that we get is not as much as what R1 Institute gets. So those are two challenges in research, and how can I handle that? The financial part, by as faculty member, like we can work around by choosing the project that fit with our institute. And even if, for example, if we have position open and we have faculty come and apply for assistant professor position, like people should not come and ask for example, 100,000 or 200,000 an instrument, and they expect that they will they will get the offer. No, they should read about the institute, about Cal State system, and know the financial situation of the Cal State system, and then so they consider that in the interview. If in the interview you get question about how much startup money do you need to start your research program, it should match with the institute financial situation. So it should be like something, it depends again if it's science or non-science. So, but in science we can ask for like 30,000, 40,000, something like that as startup money, maybe a little bit more. Yeah, Blake can talk about that if I'm, yeah, but that's choosing the project that fit with the institute financially. How can I handle availability of students? That's challenging, because you don't have students who come as a PhD or master student or postdoc, come from the morning, that's full-time job, they start experiment and working continuously every day on their project. We don't have that. So how I'm handling that? Maybe divide the project into small, tiny projects, and also put students in groups, a group of 3 or like between 2 and 4 students, and each group can take a very small part of the project. And as a faculty member, you can get some data from this group, some from this, and all of them related. You can put them in a big like work. So that's
Ahmed, in the interest of time, let me capture that. You said a couple of really important things that are worth emphasizing, that you need to approach, if we're talking about overcoming research barriers, you need to approach the design of your research in a way that matches the resources that you might have available and matches the availability and needs of the students. You have to match your expectations to those. That's a really important thing to remember.
Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you for that. Yeah. Let's jump to Celine. How are you managing to overcome barriers in research, teaching, and service?
I would say, I alluded to this earlier, but definitely the barrier for me would be time. I have children at home, which I think is something really important that we should talk about. When I was at UCSB and even my PhD, I didn't know a female in mathematics that had children. It wasn't until I was in like my 3rd year of my graduate experience there that I finally met someone with children. So I have children. It is possible. I actually had my son when I was in my PhD. But it also, of course, it is a challenge with time and balancing all aspects of your job. I know Blake also mentioned this, and this was super helpful for me, is that the RTP process is fairly transparent. So every year you're submitting a portfolio, which then gets looked at. You have to do a professional development plan at the very beginning when you get here to say how I'm going to address all of the parts of the tenure process for my department. So that's, again, very, very helpful, because then you can figure out just how you're going to structure your 5-year plan as you're going up for tenure. Another important thing that has been brought up a bit is also grants. I'm on a $6 million 5-year HSI STEM grant right now. It is helpful. I mean, of course, there's work to do with it, but it also buys me out of a class. So that's one of the things to keep in mind as well. We've had, I want to say, 3 multi-million-dollar grants here at CI, and so there's a lot of work to be done with them, and so a lot of opportunities to either get the extra pay or to buy you out of teaching a class. So that's something important to keep in mind as well. And I think those are the only other comments I had that haven't been added yet.
Great, thank you. Karina, barriers and overcoming them.
Yeah, one of, I think I was fortunate enough in my PhD program to, though not necessarily through the program, but through networks, right? Through connections with alum who were already on their tenure track journey at various types of institutions, to share their own experiences and their own kind of trajectories at private R1 institutions, at public, at small liberal arts colleges. So it's always really important to try and make use of as many contacts as you have. Many faculty are, even if you're not directly connected to them, are, at least that's been my experience, always open to sharing their bits of knowledge with you, right? Especially if you go to conferences. And so I came into CI understanding that it wasn't an R1 institution, that I shouldn't expect, you know, $50,000, $100,000 grants, that I was gonna have to work to find my own money to fund my research. That really research at the CSU system was much more of a collaborative effort. And what I mean by this is that you work with and connect with a number of faculty, whether within your institution or across other institutions, and work on large research projects, right? Or multi-state research projects. And so a lot of support in terms of funding is accessed through those means. So the first couple of years, I didn't necessarily start a whole new research project, because as Dr. Baker mentioned, you kind of are trying to get your footing with teaching. If you've never taught a course, obviously in a PhD program you have to TA, but that's not the same thing as developing your own syllabus and your own courses. And so if you've never done that before, it really does take a lot of your mental capacity to do it well, right? Or to the best of your abilities. And so the first 2 years, I didn't start a whole new research project. I was still doing a lot of my PhD, writing a lot of the manuscripts and data analysis. And I started very, second year, inching my way into a new research project to, as I said, connections that I have at other institutions. And so I was fortunate enough to have had those talks, those conversations with faculty already established at other institutions who were kind enough to tell me, hey, this is what you should expect. This is how you should prepare, and start making your plans, because you should really start with a foot on the ground running, because very quickly you're going to be expected to do X, Y, and Z. That is besides what you have as your personal agenda. And so I was pretty aware of exactly where I was coming to and what I was going to need to do to fund my research agenda.
Great, thank you. And yeah, we're hearing a lot of different sort of approaches to dealing with that problem of where the money to pay for the research comes from. Raquel, let's come back to you. You last question, you were sort of talking about some of the barriers already, alluding to how you're navigating those. Can you talk about that a little more? What barriers are you encountering now, and are they how are they different, or how are they different from other sort of institutions that you've had experience with?
I think my main barriers are probably structural. So teaching 4 classes, a 4-4, I think is a very rigorous teaching schedule. I think it makes it very difficult to teach well. And that's, that's a CSU system-wide decision. And so I am trying to find ways that I can buy out a class so I don't have to teach a 4-4, but also just trying to organize and strategize and have us really think about the best way to service our community, and is a 4-4 the best way to do that. So broadly, the division of labor of educational labor across community colleges, Cal State, and then the UC, it's very hierarchical. UC is the golden egg, right? And they're getting support. They get lower class numbers. People were talking about TAs and graders and support, right, to be a teacher. Cal State, the Cal State, we don't have as much. And then community college, even less. And so each tier, I think there's less support. This is my opinion. I think there's less support for you to be a researcher. I think the workload becomes such that it's harder to be a good teacher. So that's all structural. I really am not grappling with it other than trying to come up with cogent arguments and organize around trying to change that.
I love that though, because yay Raquel, because what you're saying is what we also are trying to do as faculty at Channel Islands is to move the needle with respect to what expectations are. Yeah, there's an administrative structure and it's a business model, and how do we engage with that if the mission of the university is to advance the educational outcomes of our community? Is this the right way to do it? And how do we push it back against that? And how do we articulate that vision? I think that's an important part of grappling with barriers, is pushing the barriers away. Yeah, I love that. So I'm trying to not be too repetitive with these questions. But I think are we still pretty good on time? Organizer peoples? Looking okay?
Yes, yeah, and I think we have some in the Q&A too that we could.
We do. I think we'll be able to get to everything. Karina, can we come back to you? Did we talk to you about barriers already? I'm sorry. We talked about balancing, but what barriers are you encountering at this point in your career?
I think I would echo on Dr. Baker's point in that kind of the structural setup really isn't the most conducive to do all or fulfill all our various expectations to our highest potential. And so this is the first semester for me that I will be teaching a 4-4. So usually your first 2 years, you're given a bit of reprieve from the 4-4 load. And so it's usually a 3-3. If you can manage a postdoc, then that's delayed. And so once you start a 4-4, then you really feel the brunt of the teaching, right? And so I'm gonna start that this semester. But I've tried to ask and seek out resources to delay the start of the 4-4 because I see my colleagues struggle with trying to balance the teaching, the research, and the service. And I learned very well during the PhD that my body is not going to be okay with that. And so just to protect my overall well-being, I've made it my mission to learn from my colleagues and to get as much knowledge and support from them to prepare myself for when the 4-4 load come, which is this semester, so that I have a foundation from which I can actually do as well as I can with those structural expectations and barriers. I definitely agree with Dr. Baker that part of the work is actually doing away with those structured inequities, right? A business model for education doesn't work. We know that, especially for communities that are underrepresented, marginalized, and expected to do more with less, right? And so for those of you who are interested in pursuing a professional career in public institutions, right, that are not R1 institutions, it's always really important to understand exactly, right, what you're going to get yourself into. And if those are the places that you feel are a best fit for you, talk to as many people as you can. Get as much historical information about where the institution was, where it is, and where it's looking to be, right? What they expect to accomplish in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Because in essence, you're committing to that, that hall, right? Especially if you see yourself fitting in not only with the culture of that institution, with their practices, but also with the broader community that is surrounded by that institution. So one of the best advice that I can give you is talk to as many people as you can, right? Get as much info as possible. Start developing those support systems once you're on the job market, right? Both for the job market and once you get out of the job market and start your professional career, so that the barriers that do exist, because they're there, right? You actually have the tools to be able to not necessarily overcome them, but at least, right, navigate through them in a way that doesn't leave you destroyed or in pain, both physical and psychological, right? That you actually enjoy the work that you envision doing. And so that's what I've been trying to do. Just try to find ways in which my colleagues can be a support system for me so that the barriers that do exist aren't felt as deeply, because without that, I've heard the horror stories from my other colleagues at other institutions, and I don't want to go through that, right? And so definitely one of the best advices I can give is support systems are critical.
Thank you for that. I would echo that and add to that. My own experience is that the CSU is a unionized faculty, which it isn't the case at all university systems that the faculty are unionized, but it does give you a certain degree of latitude in terms of how you choose to fight for change within your institution. Okay, so let me jump to Celine. There's a question in the Q&A and it's coupled to sort of the one of the questions that I had for us, which my question for you was, what would you do differently in your job now? What have you learned from the work that you've done thus far? And the participant's question was, what do you wish you'd known before you started your career at CSU? So those seem like they kind of go together to me. What have you learned that you wish you'd known when you started?
Right. I'm not sure if there's anything I would necessarily do differently, but there are definitely some things that I'm an associate professor now. I got tenure as of August. So I've taken this time to really reflect on what helped me along the way. Like what is it that what did I do every semester and every year to get me to this point? And one of the things that come to mind right away was we had a mentor program, a faculty mentor program at CI when I got here. And so Dr. Chavarria talked about this, or you know, how important it is to have that support network. It was really, I think, vital for me to have that amazing mentor that I had at CI, who's actually in the English department. So she was also a mother. She had been at CI for a long time, and having that person to help me navigate through everything was super helpful. Again, we talk about service a lot because at CI there's a lot of opportunities for that, but also talking about, well, given my interests, given you know, what my focus my focus is in serving our students, what sort of committees there are, because that's another thing to know. At CI, we are what's called a Senate of the whole. So all of our faculty, all of us are senators, voting senators. And so there's Senate meetings every couple of weeks and all that, and there's a bunch of committees to serve on those. So knowing how to navigate those was super important. Also, one thing that I'm definitely doing differently now, or that I've learned, is so whenever you are signing up for service committees, do less than what you know you can handle. Because, so for example, I'm like, okay, well, you know, say I want to serve on these 3 committees. Do 1 or 2, because every semester you will be called to do more. That things that you haven't actually signed up for at the beginning of the semester. So say, for example, you know, you could get called on by the history department to join their search committee, or there's this ad hoc committee that or task force that got called on. So you know, they're looking for volunteers, or you know, as tenure track faculty, we have to peer review all of our lecturer faculty, and so that's another thing. So again, just always sign up for, you know, half of the amount that you think you can do, because there's always going to be more every semester at the beginning or in the middle of the semester. There's also, oh, and the same thing for invitations for talks. So, you know, so if you get invited for talks outside, you know, say you're going to do like 1 a month or something, because there's always going to be more. I see a question here, which I also want to allude to. You know, I mean, I travel a lot. So I don't know if that's necessarily a R1 thing or a CI. I don't know, but I definitely I travel almost, well, not during COVID time, but at least like once a month to give talks or to serve on panels, or you know, just be part of some conference or committee. Again, this is more of the national stage, and so yeah, just try to go for half of what you think you can do every year, every semester, because there'll always be more that given semester.
Right. Thank you for that. It's the snowball of service tasks is real, and how to push back against it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. I did have one more thing I forgot. I'm looking at my note here. Another thing that I learned about definitely, but I mentioned that I wanted to work at CI specifically, or even the CSU system, because of the students we serve. And I knew this is a population I want to work with. And so the learning part for me was just like, this was alluded to before, just like how do we serve this population of students? Because again, they are at CI in particular, most of our students are commuter students. And so even like when you tell students, it's important not just to be a college student, but to be a CI student. What does that mean? You know, so being part of like, you want your students to be part of clubs and organizations and really get involved in the university. And that can be very difficult with commuter students, because a lot of the times they come to class, they do the thing, and they go. And so I'm always looking for job opportunities, on-campus job opportunities for my students. I'm like, get this job, because then you can work on campus. You don't have to leave. So it's just like, it's a lot of mentoring our students as well. But also in the classroom, it's, you know, again, learning about different pedagogies and what really is a more active learning, as opposed to like passive lecturing that many of us grew up in. I remember when somebody asked me like, oh, you know, like, do you teach calculus more conceptual? And I was like, what does that mean? I mean, I've never even heard, you know, what does it mean to teach calculus conceptually? So things like this that I think I've learned as I've gone through the tenure track process. And I consider anything about, anything dealing with diversity, equity, inclusion, and equitable teaching practices to be part of my continuous growth as an educator. So it is definitely something that I value, and I seek them out. So that's just another thing I've learned about myself, and that's important for this job in serving our students.
Thank you for that, Dr. Bañuelos. Yeah, it's so important to not assume that you know what's best for the students, and to learn that from the students. I think that's a great message. Ahmed, can you come in and tell us what you wish you knew, and what you would have done differently? I'll preface that by saying, you know, you got tenure anyway, and you published plenty of research, so you are doing a great job. But how would you approach that differently if you could start over?
If start over, so what I can think about now is like prepare my research agenda while I was a PhD student or a postdoc. Like while you are a PhD student, sometimes we are busy, we want data, we want to get our degree, but we have to realize that what we are working on, it's already exhausted by our PIs. So what is the programs that I'm going to carry and start when I move and start as assistant professor? Like what is the research questions that I'm going to work on for the next 25 years or 30 years? So while doing PhD or postdoc, make sure to have research questions and research agenda for the future. So that's what I would recommend.
Cool. Yeah. Develop your research plan. Don't have one size fits all, right? Again, we have to understand the resources of the place that we're trying to break into. Yeah. Raquel, can you tell us what you've learned since you've been at Channel Islands, and how you might have approached things differently? You're still very much in the beginning of that process, perhaps.
Yeah, I think the research note is very good, to have been thinking about my research. But I mean, almost anything I say feels like it really couldn't have happened, right? I mean, I feel like it would have been great to be very intentional. Again, like thinking about which classes I was going to teach, trying to teach 2 sections of one class, right? Like being intentional about how many preps will I have, all those kinds of things. And I think I really came into it as I do many things, certainly as I did with my PhD program, just like, oh, just figure it out. It's great. You got the job. You're teaching literature. You love literature. Just go, right? And it'll work out. So I guess I wish that I had been more intentional and strategic.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think, as a couple of panelists have mentioned, mentoring networks are really important for helping us figure out how we should approach a problem, and instead of having to do that retrospectively, which, you know, how did I get here is what I ask myself. Let's see. I think that's everyone. Mm-hmm. So I think we can what I should do at this point is turn to the panelists, Doctors Baker, Awad, Bañuelos, and Chavarria. Thank you for imparting all of your knowledge. It's I learned from you when we do these panels too. So thank you for that. And oops, I would like to consider. I'm sorry about that weird audio I'm getting through here. I would like to see if we should be turning to questions now, my colleagues. Just a second while I deal with this.
So actually, I think maybe this might be a good time just to talk about we will have more time with the panelists, but maybe talk about some resources at UCSB. Hannah, can you show the PowerPoint again? Yeah, there it is. Just if we don't answer your questions today, where you can come for more information. We have a graduate career counselor, Lana Smith-Hale, in the Graduate Resource Center. I saw some of you were asking, like, what does an application look like? Our graduate writing specialist, Robbie Nadler, is fantastic in helping students with that, and he has a sense of what's required by other, by different types of universities. But we can also, if and you can always contact me and Carlos Nash, and we can put you in touch with our colleagues at Channel Islands. So definitely contact the Graduate Resource Center or us if you need more information. I also wanted to mention, and we also want to talk about a few special programs. So we actually have a grant with Channel Islands and one of our partners. We are called AGEP, which is a program called Advances in Graduate Education and the Professorate. And the goal of that is to try and diversify the professoriate, get more diverse people, into teaching at various types of universities and colleges. So as part of that program, we had 5 students in the last couple of years who got sort of intense pedagogy training, they did a summer institute, they learned about undergraduate research, service-based learning, teaching diverse students, etc. And then they got to partner with a faculty member at Channel Islands and co-teach a class. So they got a really intense experience of what it would be like to be a professor at a CSU type institution. And now we're currently they're all kind of finishing their PhDs, and we're in touch with them, and we're really giving them a lot of mentoring around applying for jobs, etc. And we hope that there'll be another call for students to be part of this program in spring. And so that's one thing. And I think Carlos has a short video from the students who participated in the last one that we wanted to show you. And we really, those of you who are interested in this path, we're hoping, keep a look out and, stay in touch with us, because we'll hopefully be having a competition for another cohort of students in the spring. So do you want to show that, Carlos?
Sure, just let me pull this up. Let's see, here we go. All right.
The AGEP California HSI Alliance brings together 4 Hispanic-serving institutions with the goal of developing, implementing, and testing a model for creating a more diverse STEM faculty. It focuses on pedagogical training and career mentoring to prepare historically underrepresented doctoral students for faculty careers at a broad range of colleges and universities. Our first cohort participated in a 10-day summer institute. They were paired with and shadowed CSU faculty members for the fall 2019 semester. Their experiences were wide-ranging with many rewarding outcomes.
We gave the students that diversity data set from Sequoia. Product from that is we submitted this paper. It's a close one. We just got comments back, so we're working our way through.
One of the coolest experiences was being able to work with these students one-on-one, students who are interested in applying to PhD programs, taking their experiences in animal neuroscience and wanting to go into human-based neuroscience. I was able to kind of give them my perspective on that.
He also showed me his lab, and he told me how he was able to build it up at a primarily teaching institution. He also told me about the impact that it has on the students who want to go to graduate school, because it provides them firsthand research experience and even some publications, being that it's just an all undergraduate institution.
I feel that I have a much better understanding of what it means to be a faculty professor at the CSU, both the good and the challenging that comes with that. The cross-institutional collaboration has also been an aspect that has transformed my graduate education.
Having that experience with the CSU system and having always just been at UCSB, I think having those 2 worlds matched was incredible.
It was almost like watching, graduate students and undergrads turn into children. And that's exactly how I act when I'm learning something new. That was pretty powerful for me. And that's, I think, the type of teacher that I want to be.
The most formative part of working with Dr. Fleming for me was the opportunity to work with a professor who I could see myself being one day, and also working in a university that I could really enjoy being at because of the focus on student experiences, learning, and collaboration between other faculty.
Dr. Flores taught me, modeled for me, how to be a Latino math professor, in particular what it looks like to separate out teaching the content from the stereotypical narrative that permeates our field. I now identify as a future faculty member. I feel ready to teach the next generation of students.
Somebody just grabbed me and was like, here, you're gonna get to experience what it is to be a professor at a CSU. And it was something that just confirmed that that's what I wanted to do. It was an excellent experience. It was a pleasure meeting everyone. It's just wonderful that hopefully you guys can continue to do this for other students.
No, we don't want to watch that again.
So please stay tuned for that. I think also, I mean, that is sort of a STEM grant, although STEM was defined very broadly. We had sociologists, we had a math educator. So so a lot of people are potentially eligible for this. I think there's also going to be another program this summer with some money we got from the Office of the President, which will again be sort of preparing people for the professorate more generally, exploring different types of jobs, different types of colleges and universities, and just helping students to figure out where they think they might find themselves, and also in that will also include some information on the job application process, helping you with your materials and all that. So, and then Carlos, I think you had some information to share about the CAGEP program.
Sure, I also noticed that there was a couple of questions regarding that. One of them was, first of all, how do you find a mentor to do the CAGEP program? And that's where interacting with Associate Dean Mary Hegarty, and then also me at the graduate division, because we have connections with our colleagues at the CSUs via this AGEP program that we are, it's a 5-year endeavor. And so we have a great relationship, and we would be glad to put you into connection with people who are genuinely interested in serving as mentors. With that being said, CAGEP generally is the Chancellor's Doctoral Incentive Program at California State Universities, and it's to help fund individuals who, basically are expressing an interest to teach at a CSU. And so there are a couple of other additional benefits besides just getting a loan to complete your doctoral degrees. You can get, money specifically for your own research, to do traveling and professionalization. And the benefit of the CAGEP program is that if you were to be hired at a CSU, you don't have to repay all of that loan back. It cuts down by 20% for every year that you are an instructor or a faculty member at the CSUs. If you do a postdoc at the CSUs, or while working at the CSUs, then it's like 10%. But there's an incentive, for becoming a faculty member at a CSU. And so in the chat is a link to the website, CSU's website on the CAGEP program. And I will go ahead and also paste this link because this is the latest version of the guide. Let's see, maybe will it go to all attendees? Here we go.
You can make it go.
There we go. And that is the latest guide for the 2021 season for CAGEP, and it has the full details of repayments, how much maximum. Usually it's $30,000 maximum over 5 years for the loan. So, has any of the panelists done CAGEP, or did you all get to use it? No.
I'm not aware of anybody pursuing it on our campus. No, so I don't have experience with it. So thanks for all of that. We have a bunch of questions in the Q&A that we can start taking apart. And I'm taking a look at them. The first one is really, some of them are specific, some of them pretty general. The first one is asking, can we talk more about the retention, tenure, and promotion path for CSU faculty? For each of your departments, what is the stated percentage between teaching, research, and service? So answering that question fully will take definitely the balance of our time, and I'm not sure that we want to go down that road in this context. We can certainly address these questions more broadly outside of this context. So I think Dr. Bañuelos referred to the fact that during the tenure process, we have a series of checkpoints yearly, really, and then their major checkpoints at a couple of different points along that 5-year path, where we begin with professional development program, and as was alluded, we have evaluation and feedback at all stages of that process, and that sort of points to what I was referring to before as a sort of a more supportive aspect of the tenure process in the CSU. As far as the percentages, and anybody else can jump in here to help if they want with this. Yeah, go ahead. Whose voice?
No, I just wanted to add that. So we work on like a 15-unit contract. So every semester is like 15 units, and 3 of those units though are automatically sort of set to the side for service. And so technically, we're not being paid to do research. It's pretty much over the summer. So that's an important thing to note, because we're saying like, when do we carve out time for research and all that? It's really on you, because we're not getting paid for it technically. So you have the 15 units of semester. 3 of those units are supposed to be for service, and 12 units of teaching, which usually boils down to 4 courses, because many courses are 3 units. And so when you're being evaluated, I wouldn't necessarily say there's a stated percentage between teaching, research, and service. You're evaluated according to your program's what we call personnel standards. And so every program has a set of like rules or things that they're going to say, like, this is what we're looking for. And that's how you're being evaluated. But Dr. Awad did say this earlier, though. We are ranked on a scale of 1 through 5. You need 2 4s and a 3. So 2 4s on teaching, research, service, and 1 3. But one of those 4s must be in teaching. And so the other 4 could be on your research or could be on your service. But generally, to get a 4 on that service, it's got to be like high, and I mean really high. So I think there's that.
So yeah, and then this sort of couples to Maite's question. I'm wondering what kind of research expectations are part of your tenure process, and how much the institution supports your research in terms of funding, time, and resources. Again, that's a big question, but it's captured in the personnel standards that were alluded to a moment ago. In the chemistry department, for example, we have a requirement that you engage with undergraduate students routinely. Hey, you can see my cat chair now. No cat. So you're required to engage with undergraduates in research projects routinely, and that can happen all year long. And then that you get 2 publications in your tenure period. So that's a fairly straightforward bar to capture. But again, it's made clear for us. So those are the research expectations for chemistry. But they vary from department to department, but they're all there. And again, as was alluded to before, the teaching is the one that's expected to be, you're expected to be excelling at your teaching. Anybody else want to say anything about research expectations in their own programs?
We're required 3 papers.
3 papers, yeah.
Yeah, the same here. Sorry, Selene. And depending on when you come into a program, you may have the opportunity to decide and dictate the requirements and expectations for the personnel standards, right? So what is going to be expected in terms of service to the program, to the university, to the wider community. Some programs want you to participate in conferences and develop be editors in journals and organize committees at national presentations. Others want you to actually work with the communities that surround the campus, right? Either through nonprofit organizations, a plethora of different forms of service. And that's really pertinent to your particular program. If you're lucky, you enter the program where they are reviewing their personnel standards and you actually get a voice in deciding, okay, how many articles? Is it a full-on book? The history department requires that you publish a book, right? So you're gonna have to publish a book if you want to, you know, gain tenure and promotion. Others, as Dr. Bañuelos mentioned, require 3 articles, 2 sole authored and 1, you know, collaboration. It really ranges, and it really depends on the program.
Blake, like before we ran out of time, because I saw on the chat 2 questions for about international students. So yeah, so can we just find those questions?
So hello, what are the common challenges of applying for positions as an international graduate student? I personally don't have deep knowledge on what the barriers to that might be. So that's something that we'll have to explore more, or if other people have a clearer sense of that, they can.
No, I agree. Okay, so I agree with Blake. I think what's nice here, I don't know, I like in the country in general, when you apply for, we have too many international faculty, and when you apply for a faculty position, your resume is the one talks about everyone, not where they are from, what are they from. No, the resume is the one that that talk about everyone. So like with my experience, I didn't feel like international or not international, there is a difference. So yeah.
Oh yeah, if the question is, what are you disadvantaged in terms of your you know, your rankings in the search process, I would say that's not part of the decision at all. If there are other parameters that pertaining to that, those are the ones that I don't understand. But no, certainly not. It's not a barrier at all.
I mean, I can say I was an international student when I got my job at UCSB, and you know, UCSB sponsored me for visas and all that sort of. I mean, you know, if you're hired, the institution that hires you will you know, help you with that. Mine was a little bit complicated, but
there are administrative structures in place to support that. Yeah,
and exactly the same for me. Cal State Channel Island sponsored me until I got my like now citizenship.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, guys. Let's just keep going down the questions. One reason that I'm looking away from an R1 institution is the insane amount of travel that I see being required of new faculty in STEM. Can you speak to the pressure to travel to collaborators, labs, conferences, et cetera, in the CSU system, particularly in STEM? So we're all going to have idiosyncratic answers to that. And I can say that I didn't feel pressured to travel internationally or otherwise for my work at all. So really, it's just a matter of what are you determining to be the requirements for success, and how are you going to meet those requirements? And if travel is a part of that, then you know your question should be, how are you supporting me in that? Yeah. Anybody else? But
yeah, agreed. And again, this goes back to your program personnel standards. You have to see on like what are they requiring for you in terms of your research, and is there support? So when I came in, I was able to ask for at least a $5,000 in startup because there was this one Project Next. By the way, any of you math people in the room, I wanted to be part of that program through the MAA, and so I asked for that money coming in because I knew I would have to travel for that. But at least in math, you know, we asked for like at least one talk at a major conference a year, and that usually involves travel, and there is funding to cover like one conference really. But you'll find though, I would say at least in math, I was able to get funding for a lot of talks because a lot of the conferences want faculty from predominantly undergraduate institutions or that serve at HSIs or something like that. So they will fund for you to be there, especially if you bring students as well. So I would say, I mean, I mentioned this before, I travel almost like once a month for the last like 6 years. And I wanted to, I paid out of pocket for like one of those when I traveled to Spain, part of it. But so there's definitely, I mean, you have to seek some of that out, but yeah.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. How to get started in the process of applying if still finishing a PhD, where to look, who to contact, and what to have prepared. And this sort of relates to one of the questions that's been answered in the Q&A. I think I answered it earlier, which was, do you have to have a postdoc? And the answer is, it really depends on your discipline. And even within a discipline, in the chemistry department, we are looking for people with postdoctoral experience, but that's not an absolute requirement at all. We're really looking at the package that you're presenting, and so how to be ready for the hot tip for how to be ready for your application is to develop a research program that addresses the needs of the students and the resources available at your institution, and make sure that you're ready to develop as an innovative instructor. And so I would say that more important in some cases than the postdoctoral experience or the list of publications that you're bringing is how well you're able to articulate your educational and pedagogical values, yeah, and what have you pursued in your career thus far to develop those chops. That will push your application to the top of the pile over all of the people that have postdocs, more postdoctoral experience and a lot more publications, right? So a solid research proposal that's aimed at undergraduates and a demonstration of your own interest in being an innovative teacher. Anybody else? That's my 2 cents.
No, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, we just keep charting. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I can jump in just real quick.
Yeah.
Depending, of course, on the field, right? There are. I made use of a lot of different resources, right? I asked people for their files, right? For their cover letters, for their research statements, for their diversity statements. I made use of, for us in sociology, the American Sociological Association. They have a plethora of samples of files for job applications, job talks, right? Go to job talks for people who are on the job market now, right? Sit in on the kinds of questions that they ask, the presentation, and definitely talk to other people in other departments, right? There are, just across the board expectations for job application files, and then particulars to your own field of study. So get on listservs, try to, tap into different types of resources and to get access, especially if you're concerned about how do I put together my cover letter, how do I put together my research statement, my teaching statement. You'd be surprised how welcoming some faculty are, and particularly those who are on the job market or were like 2 years ago, in sharing their materials with you to support you in putting that those documents together.
So so we're at 5 o'clock and I don't want to keep our panelists longer than, but I can tell it's great that there's so much interest and so many questions, and I put Carlos and my email addresses in the chat, and just feel free to follow up with us. And Blake is also, and because if you have any questions and if we can't answer them, we can put you in touch with faculty at CSU who can answer your questions. But I really want to thank the panelists so much for sharing everything with us this afternoon, and it was a fantastic panel, and I know that we all, the students and everybody, got a lot out of it, so really can't thank you enough. So
thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.